The Territory poll. Well, for more, let's go to Canberra. Political correspondent Latika Burke is speaking to Liberal Senator Arthur Sinodinos.
Do you think the Conservatives are going to claim victory in the Northern Territory tonight?
Latika, it sounds like it's going to be relatively close just from some information I had during the week. I think it'll be decided on territory factors. They're a different breed up there. And as your report indicated, the current government's been in there for a fair time now, and to be honest, while they've tried to ride the wave of development up in the Territory, I'm not sure that they've really tackled some of the infrastructure and Indigenous issues that really need to be sorted out if the Territory is to have a sustainable future.
So you don't think there'll be federal implications written in any message the electorate sends?
I'd be surprised. Most polls these days, you focus on the level of government that you and whether you want to change that level of government. And if people feel strongly that the Territory needs a change of government, they will do that. I wouldn't read too much into it at this stage.
Arthur Sinodinos, why do you think BHP delayed expanding its Olympic Dam mine?
Well, I can only go on what they've said themselves. It's an environment of rising costs for them. Commodity prices seem to have been coming off. I think they've got the luxury of waiting when it comes to Olympic Dam, and I think they're waiting to see whether the cost environment can improve. They're waiting to see, I suspect, whether if there were a change of government, conditions improve which allow them to accelerate the development of the mine. Marius Kloppers in the past has referred to the overall cost environment in Australia, including things like the tax environment. On this occasion, he focused specifically, I think, on operating or capital costs. But we'll have to wait and see. I think it is a difficult time for major projects in Australia. Our costs are rising relative to overseas. There seems to be, in the infrastructure and construction sectors, a differential of about 30 to 50%, partly shortage of labour and materials, and partly I think there is some wage push going on in some of the more expanding sectors like mining. We need to watch all of that, and the Australian dollar is also putting its own cost impacts on the sectors, although it is also reducing the cost of imported inputs, so there are some swings and roundabouts there.
Look, I do want to get to construction costs, but I notice in your answer there you're not saying or not blaming the carbon or the mining taxes as your leader has done this week.
Look, the carbon and mining taxes have a more pervasive impact across the sector as a whole. But what I'm saying is, if you're asking me what did they specifically say in their statement, that's what they said. But in the past, Marius Kloppers has, in various other contexts, criticised both the mining tax and the carbon tax. And certainly going forward, we would have a policy on the sector of taking taxes off rather than adding new taxes and adding to the cost burden in the sector.
So in that case, Arthur Sinodinos, could a Liberal government assure South Australians that the expansion would go ahead under them?
My belief is that it would go ahead under a Liberal government, yes.
How soon?
Well, look, how soon is the election? How soon could we discuss the matter with them? But a combination of a Liberal federal government and a Liberal state government would maximise the opportunity for that project to go ahead. I can guarantee you that.
Now, back to construction costs, which is one of those factors BHP itself identified. What exactly would the opposition look towards addressing construction costs? Because when the states came to COAG last, Prime Minister Gillard refused them a Productivity Commission inquiry into construction costs, saying that they were too busy to examine this issue.
Well, look, notwithstanding her refusal to do that, one of the commitments we have made is to restore some teeth to the building and construction industry watchdog. We had quite an effective Building and Construction Commission, which was estimated at one stage to be helping the sector to realise $5 billion worth of savings. Because the fact of the matter is, it's a sector that's sheltered from a degree of competition, and that's allowed people, both employers and employees, unions like the CFMEU and others, to run rampant on some sites, and we do need to have a much stronger inspector. And that would be part of a policy to help restrain construction costs. You would then also look at ways in which you promote cheaper imports of materials and other things where possible to help reduce those costs. More workplace flexibility, where there's more productivity in the construction and related sectors, would also help.
What do you mean by flexibility? And also, in terms of cheaper imports, would you be looking to scrap the local content mandate that the government's introducing?
Look, On the first measure, in terms of flexibility, the government's own review of the Fair Work Act indicated that on greenfield sites there were some issues around the costs that were potentially being put on those sites, and they themselves admitted something had to be done about it. In the case of local content rules, you raise a good point. We must try and make sure that Australian producers of materials get a fair go, but not to the point where it makes it prohibitive to use those materials and therefore damages the very projects we need to get up, which will otherwise maximise our employment prospects. Latika, there's always a balance in these things.
Do you think it's prohibitive at the current level?
I beg your pardon?
Do you think the current level is prohibitive?
Look, in one sense, the fairest way to answer that question is you do that on a case-by-case basis. But you don't want a situation where you arbitrarily say that you can only use X proportion of local materials without, I think, having some regard to the cost impediment that might be. And at the moment, if we've got a cost blowout of 30 to 50% in Australia vis-a-vis similar projects overseas, you've got to ask yourselves, what are we doing wrong?
Arthur Sinodinos, this week Tony Abbott twice admitted he hadn't read key documents that he was then seeking to comment on. Earlier in this term, he's boasted on Triple M that he found time to read 50 Shades of Grey. Does that strike you as odd from a man wanting to be the future Prime Minister?
Well, if I had a choice between reading 50 Shades of Grey and another industry policy statement, I guess I'd go for 50 Shades of Grey. But
I've read it, Arthur Sinodinos. It's not that good.
OK, well, I'll take your word for it, Latika. But look, he did say later that he had actually read the statement from BHP, so I'm not quite sure what was going on there. I do have to say, in my own job, I just have trouble keeping up with the torrent of emails through the day. I'm surprised today with the information revolution we've got how anybody can keep on top of everything, but I do hasten to add that he did say that he did actually read that statement, so I'm not sure what the snafu there was.
But do you think he fumbled on those issues because perhaps, as Laurie Oakes writes this morning, he's not doing the hard yards on the complex stuff?
Look, he's working hard, he's running around the country, he's doing a lot of stuff, he does a lot of writing himself. He got up at 3 o'clock one morning to start writing his speech on free speech, for example. He does a lot of stuff himself. From time to time, he's only human. He will stumble, and that's part of his charm, I suppose, as a person. I've known him for a long time, that he's the first to admit he's got his strengths, he's got his weaknesses, but he's fundamentally a good bloke who works very hard, and I think his heart is in the right place in terms of what he's trying to do.
Arthur Sinodinos, we've run out of time. Thank you for joining us on ABC News 24.
Thanks, Latika.